Jeremy, and thank you everyone for having me. It's a real honour to be part of Creative Mornings. I've attended so many of them in my transition to becoming self-employed, and it's so sad we can't be all together in person, but I do believe that breakout rooms are the next best thing. As Jeremy mentioned, I'm going to be covering insecurity and what my experience has been transitioning from a corporate role into running my own business. And then I'll share a little bit about what the KonMari method is, some quick tips to creating a mindful home, and why you should be living with less. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a small regional town in Victoria with 3,000 people, and I was considered a townie because I lived 10 minutes by car from school. I loved and still do love my hometown, but all I wanted to be when I was a little girl was a businesswoman. And I particularly remember wanting to take the train to work because you definitely can't do that in rural Victoria. I was decluttering some photos a few months ago, and I found a photograph of myself for my in year 10, and I was sitting on a briefcase dressed in a suit with a neck scarf because being a career woman was being a corporate woman was my goal. So I went to uni and I studied business management, and I eventually got into corporate finance at university. I worked in sales before the Royal Commission, and we had daily stand-ups of how much credit we'd sold, how many credit cards we had in our pipeline, asset finance, and we were continually competing and selling with each other. It was a really fast-paced and fun environment and really exciting time in my work life. By 28, Melbourne was feeling a little bit small, and I'm sure like many of you have felt or done, I was getting a bit itchy. So I packed up my tiny one-bedroom apartment that I bought a few years before, and I moved to New York City. I wanted to work in the capital market. I wanted to take the subway to Midtown, just like they did on the movies. And I had next to no experience in trading or international markets. And I was reading Michael Lewis books in Central Park for research. With the help of Google, I was teaching myself the difference between bonds and commodities and futures and all the bells and whistles that went with them. So I didn't sound silly in interviews. Somehow, crazily, after 3 months of door knocking, I landed a role in Midtown with one of Europe's biggest banks. And I was working in their capital markets regulation team. And I was working in their futures division. And I spent the next 2 years loving New York City. But the craziest thing about New York is that it pushes you all the time. And for those of you who have lived or visited the city, you would understand what I mean. Just when you think you've got the hang of it, it throws something crazy at you. It's not an easy city to live in, and it opens up all of your insecurities and tells you to do better all the time. For me, New York City showed me that despite all the time and effort and energy I put into becoming a banker, I hated it. And I especially hated being a banker in New York. I loved the city, but I hated the corporate culture. So I just opened myself up and I thought, live in the moment and do whatever I can and enjoy New York City before returning home to Melbourne, including a 3-day course with Marie Kondo. And it was when The Life-Changing Magic was coming out in about 2016, and I'd read Marie's book, and I loved it. I really liked decluttering. I'm a naturally organised person, so I thought, what the hell, I'll go along, it'll be fun. And when I arrived in this smallish kind of average conference room in Bryant Park, I was shocked with what I found. Everyone there was obsessed with her. People had flown from all over the world to meet this tiny Japanese folding lady called Marie Kondo. There were dozens of Canadians. There were a few Europeans who were translating instructions from Japanese into English and back to the native tongue. There was even a lady from Brazil and someone from New Zealand. They were all making my L-train subway ride from Brooklyn look really insignificant. And I never intended on being a tidy consultant. But after the course, everyone I spoke to was interested. Every time I posted on social media, I got traction. And when I returned home to Australia, people wanted to pay me to organise their wardrobes. It was a little bit of a surreal experience. So I made a website and a logo, and I bought a camera, and I taught myself how to use social media. I made invoice templates on Excel, and I spent myself reading books and listening to podcasts on how to be a side hustler. And for those of you who have done the side hustle thing or are doing it now, you would understand that it's a labor of love. There's no social life, there's limited Netflix, there's no dating life. All of your spare time is spent building your business. And after a while, I convinced myself that if I wanted to be really serious about home sanctuary, could move my finance down to 4 days a week. And it was around this time that all of my insecurities started to bubble up. But what about the money? Are you really sure you want to be an organizer? I mean, you've been working in capital markets in New York City. You should be working on your job and your career here in Melbourne. You should be following up all these LinkedIn leads you're getting. And then Netflix came along and I got more social media coverage, and I got some TV time, and I started to run my own workshops. And then it clicked. Despite the sickness, that feeling, that heavy feeling of leaving my safe and secure, well-paid corporate job, home sanctuary was making me happier. So I left almost a year ago, and the hardest thing for me was my identity shift. I remember quite clearly coming home to my partner one night and crying that all of those years I'd spent working my ass off to become a banker, I had ended up folding tea towels on social media. But the crazy thing is that some people get a lot of joy out of folding tea towels. And I mean, hell, Marie Kondo has been listed one of the world's most influential women for helping people love their homes. And that is why I left finance, to help people stop and enjoy their space, to stop the constant drive for more, to slow the rate of consumption and help families connect with their belongings, themselves, and the environment. And that connection to a bigger cause and that drive and that passion to show my community how to live less is insanely rewarding. Sure, I learn a lot less money now. I have no colleagues and I have no sick leave. I have no bonus, no client dinners, no business flights, but I'm a hell of a lot happier. I'm calmer and I'm more self-aware, and I'm confident with what my role is. So to help overcome my insecurities, I found my skill gaps and I'm filling them in. In true analytical fashion, I created a SWOT analysis and set out my themes and stories and my sprint cycles. And I'm currently completing my Master's in Environment at Melbourne University. And I pay someone to do all the stuff that I find really hard, like editing blogs. Being a small business owner, I think that really the insecurities is part of the job description. We have no one to report to. We have no one to tell us what to do, to grade us, or even congratulate us a lot of the time. And to make it worse, we get emails and we get LinkedIn messages daily from experts telling us that we need to have a better website, better lead generation, to improve our podcast skills or social media marketing. Insecurities are always apparent, and we just need to focus on what we're doing and what our role is and really connect with that. And the crazy thing is that these insecurities just keep on coming. Just when I was getting used to keynote addresses in person, everything has moved online, which is a completely different skill because it's really hard to engage with you when I can't see you in person. And I'm sure for those of you who are seasoned business owners, you would have a multitude of examples of insecurities throughout your business life. So that's about the insecurities of my transition. And I did promise that I would share a little bit about the KonMari method. So let me just share my screen. Bear with me one moment. Okay. Can you guys see that? I'm pretty sure you can. Okay, so here is a picture of me with Marie Kondo in the top left-hand corner. She's very tiny and very Japanese, and she's a very sweet lady. So for those of you who don't know what the KonMari technique is, it's a method of organizing or decluttering created by a lady called Marie Kondo. And in 2014, she published a book called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. And she later on to write a second book called Spark Joy, which is the book at the back, but that's more of like an organizational manual. And she sold 11 million copies worldwide, and it's been translated into at least 40 different languages. So before Marie came along, organisers and individuals were focused on storage solutions to make space. Companies like IKEA and the Container Store and even Kmart were selling organising solutions to help people take control of the amount of stuff they were accumulating. But that doesn't really work for a multitude of reasons. Storage is really just more places to put stuff. And it's not really asking us the question of why do we have so much stuff? So there are 3 key reasons that make Marie's method of organising so unique. We declutter by category and not by room. We have this notion of sparking joy, which I'm sure you've heard about. It's become a really common hashtag nowadays. And vertical folding. So obviously I don't have time to go through all of those things today. That's what I do with my clients and in workshops. So please reach out if you want to know more about that. But I really want to touch on the concept of joy. So the KonMari method tells us to only keep what spark joy. So keep those items and store those items that really make us feel good, that we're proud of, that we're happy to display in our home, that when we wear them, they make us feel confident, or they provoke a really happy memory. And anything that doesn't feel like that, to let it go. And the concept of joy really aids in complex decision making. So in the concept of letting things go, it asks us to evaluate not what's the purpose of an item or how useful it is, but how it makes us feel and how it adds value to our lives. And for me personally, it spoke to me because I loved the logical and rational sequence to reduce the amount of things that I owned. So the Marie Kondo method was born and developed in Japan, not only because they love little cute things, the Japanese always have a beautiful little knickknacks, but because they already had limited space and were looking for logical ways to get rid of stuff. But the relationship with the objects that we have has changed dramatically in the last 50 years, and all of us can benefit from reducing the amount of things that we own. I always like to tell the story of my grandmother. When she passed away a few years ago, I inherited her 68-piece dinner set, and every piece she had collected individually throughout the war. And this thought process of buying a dinner set in individual pieces just seems so foreign to me now, because I can go into many stores and get multiple dinner sets, probably in one purchase. Because once upon a time, having a lot of stuff was a symbol of wealth. It displayed a level of education, of success, and of status. Buying a lawnmower took a few weeks of work. Having multiple bathing suits was a luxury. But with the Industrial Revolution, the establishment of trade agreements, the access to credit, improved production cycles, and cheap labour, almost everyone in our community has access to excess. And I will emphasise our community because in Australia, we are a relatively wealthy nation and we have an elevated GDP per capita, which makes the whole issue of excess stuff even harder to stomach. I've got some facts there that's on the screen as well, that in the USA, there are more storage facilities than there are McDonald's, Starbucks, and Subway restaurants combined. 35 of the wealthiest countries consume about 100 kilograms of material goods per person per day. And in Australia, we send 6,000 kilograms of textile waste to landfill every 10 minutes. These issues have multiple layers, but what I really want to address is the loss of the personal connection to objects and the disconnect with the resources required to get them to us. With access to so much stuff, like that is the ability to buy a t-shirt for just a few dollars, many of us have more. And we now live in an advertising amphitheatre. There is marketing absolutely everywhere with targeted algorithms to tell us to purchase objects we didn't even know that we knew that we wanted. So saying no and living with less, for most of us, requires a lot of discipline and really requires a reassessment of what we have, of what we truly need, and a deeper understanding of the impact of buying more. So how do we get there? How do we create a mindful home? The first thing I've got there is written is a focus on joy. Now, this may sound a little bit woo-woo, but reducing the amount of things in your home using your personal connection or your attraction to an item as a yardstick is, in my view, the best way to not only slim down the amount of stuff that you have, but really provides a guide to what to do, what you really do need and you do not need. And of course, it really needs to be done respectfully. Like, you can't just say, I love Veronica Main clothing, so I should buy everything. How spark joy or joy really should be used is before every purchase or the acceptance of an item, asking yourself, will this item truly bring me joy for a long time? And are the resources used and the real estate I give it in my home worth the joy that it's going to give back? I just imagine if all of us thought that way, I could assure you that the consumption levels would drop dramatically. So if purchasing isn't really an issue for you and you're more worried about letting things go and creating waste, then it's important to remember that you took ownership of the resources at the purchase or the accumulation of an item, not at the point of waste. And I really encourage you to flip this kind of thought process around making waste at the end of a product's life cycle or time with us. This idea of I don't want to create waste, we really need to think about it and in the reverse. And so for any of you who have read or studied or had an interest in the circular economy, you would know that that's what it's all about. It's about creating closed loop production cycles, keeping a product and the resources in use for as long as possible, not just focusing on the waste at the output. So I encourage you to think about the resource use at purchase, not at the end. So why live with less? Here's a whole list of reasons. I could talk about this subject forever, so I'll just kind of keep it brief. But the first thing I've got there is see, know, and use what you have. Understanding and being able to see what you have in your home really helps to develop a unique story that tells a story of your family and your values. It helps build your home sanctuary. When you have a home that is a jumble of stuff, and it's really hard to identify and connect with it. And that's when you lose that connection to objects and you lose the respect for the resources and the time it took us to get to us. And we start to see them as dispensable. And that also comes along with when products to get really cheap. We start to see them as dispensable. It saves a lot of time and money. So you're no longer losing items and looking for them and repurchasing for things you lost. When it's so common when I'm going through people's wardrobes or drawers, they're like, oh, I didn't know I had that. I lost it. I bought another one. And there's a really fun fact that says that over a lifetime, it's estimated that the average person spends 153 days searching for misplaced items. So you can definitely make better use of the 153 days. Having an organised, mindful space also helps with sustainability. So being organised assists with the desire to have and need less. The reduction in consumables has a profound impact on the environment. Now, I've already mentioned the amount of textile waste we send to landfill, but of course there are other issues as well with biodiversity loss due to overproduction and an immense pressure on our planetary boundaries just by this constant use of resources. It invokes control. So creating a calm living space enables us to relax, rest better, reduces stress, anxiety, and aids family harmony. Everyone deserves to live in a relaxed environment, especially children. And I often get asked to come and help families when they are at each other's necks with the amount of stuff they have in their home. And it doesn't really aid family communication, fighting over things. So it definitely helps with family harmony. It enables us to take on more. So once we are in control of our lives, we can spend more time and energy building a life we want to live. Now, this is a real minimalistic focus here. And there is time to focus on our dreams and our goals and maybe build our businesses even more. It really helps us get more out of life. And I'm really passionate about this one because for a long time, I was really insecure about being organised and a need for structure. But the reality is that organised personality of mine and the joy I get from having things in a place and I know where they are is really part of the puzzle that brought me here today. Mindfulness. So organised structures in our home allow us to arrange a space so that it gives back to its inhabitants, enabling us to convert daily tasks to mindfulness practices. Now, this is really a whole topic in itself, and I could also go on about this for hours. But what I'm really saying here is that when things in our home have a place, and it takes away the stress for looking for things and putting things away and the distraction of having stuff in our peripheral vision all the time, it allows us to do our daily chores mindfully. It allows us to walk through our day to day with a real presence, and that has a profound benefit on our health. So that actually comes to the end of my presentation, and I thank you guys all so much. I really hope that I can share a little bit of happiness and mindfulness in this time for your home. I think in this crazy time of COVID, having a nurturing space that we feel safe and secure that allows us to recuperate and to work is a really hard thing, and it's something that can be taught and learnt. So I think that it's something we'll spend time on. So you can find my social media channels at Home Sanctuary on Facebook and on Instagram. And I also send out a fortnightly newsletter that it's edited by someone because I don't feel confident, a bit insecure about that. So beautiful blogs. So please sign up to our newsletter if you want to do that. It's over at homesanctuary.com.au. Thank you so much.